Hey everyone, Wayne Fox here. The other day I was printing this image, part of a series of 50 prints that I do in a portfolio box. I entitle it The Perfect Moment because they're images I think that have a little bit of a unique quality, common location sometimes. This case, maybe this puffy white cloud that I got or a little piece of fog is fairly common here. I've seen quite a few images of this location where it wasn't there. So I felt fortunate for me when I was there, and sometimes landscape photography is about luck. But at the time I was working on this, I also kind of reminisced because you can't take this shot anymore. And I'm not sure there's a vantage point available to take a really nice image of this waterfall anymore due to a couple of events that happened. And it made me think about other images I've got that are like that. It's surprising how many images I have that are no longer possible or wouldn't have the same impact because of the way things have changed. Sometimes it's nature. Sometimes it's unfortunately not nature. And there's also quite a few images that I've seen over the years, things that I thought were really great and are no longer possible to take. And I thought, heck, that should make an interesting series. So the first one in this series, I'm going to call it Gone But Not Forgotten, for lack of a better term. But the first one I'm going to talk about is this particular shot. This is Metlako Falls in the Columbia River Gorge near Portland, Oregon. And let me just kind of go into detail why this image is no longer possible. Metlako Falls is the first waterfall among many along the famous Eagle Creek Trail in the Columbia River Gorge in Oregon. The trailhead is on the south side of the gorge, about 40 miles east of Portland and shortly before the town of Cascade Locks. This is a 25-mile out and in trek, and although not very difficult technically, the elevation gain is around 4,000 feet, so it can be a little strenuous. Parts of the trail follow along the steep cliffside, and some areas offer a chain handhold, but not a good idea for children or pets. Metlako Falls itself is only about 1.5 miles from the trailhead, so getting to it is a pretty simple hike. Sources say Metlako Falls was discovered in 1915 by a group known as the Mazamas, which apparently was a Portland-based mountaineering organization or club. A committee from this group chose the name Metlako after a Native American goddess of salmon. Naming it after this goddess of salmon was most likely due to the fact that this waterfall and its sister waterfall mark the end for spawning salmon to navigate upstream because those two waterfalls are too high for them to navigate. I can't find any official documentation about Metlako and how the Native American culture and history tie into this. Any references to Metlako with an internet search only turn up references to this waterfall. So I'm not sure what tribe or tribes this comes from, and I'm not sure about any of the legend or history behind the goddess. Kind of seems surprising since the internet seems to know everything nowadays. Hopefully this hasn't been lost to history and someone eventually might document it on the internet. So what happened? Well, I'll rely on a couple of very good websites. I'll link them in the description below. They discuss the problem, maybe borrow a few of their photographs. Hope they don't mind. But in late November of 2016, a hiker reported some deep and ominous cracks near this overlook. Collapses along the edge of canyons aren't uncommon in this area, but this apparently is maybe the first time that a collapse was actually predicted based on an observation like this. And sometime between the 17th of December, which is the date of the last known photograph taken from the overlook, and December 26th, a 300 to 400 foot section of the cliff face collapsed into the canyon below. While the collapse was expected, it was far greater than anyone thought, and the overlook fell into the creek below, which dammed the creek and created a fairly large pool. And unfortunately, at the new edge of the canyon wall, the viewpoint is obstructed and no longer offers the stunning view of this waterfall. Now, if that wasn't enough, on September 2nd of 2017, some teenagers carelessly threw some fireworks into the Eagle Creek Canyon, and this sparked a devastating fire that ended up burning tens of thousands of acres along Eagle Creek and even further west towards Portland. Over 150 hikers had to be evacuated with the help of emergency personnel out through the top of the trailhead, most having to navigate nearly 12 miles and over 3,000 feet of elevation gain to the Watum Lake trailhead to escape this fire. The natural support structure of the roots of trees and plants along the canyon walls were affected by this destruction, and thousands of trees ended up falling and clogging up many of the areas of the creek as well as other creeks draining into the Columbia River Gorge. The former trail at the Metlako vantage point was destroyed by the fire, although it wasn't very useful anyway. Now, Metlako Falls was rather famous for kayakers braving the 82-foot drop coming down this creek, but after the fire, the creek became too clogged with fallen trees to accommodate these kayakers. Now, kind of crazy anyway. I don't know how the viewpoints along the trail were affected, but I'm sure there were areas that are now covered with burnt out dead trees. Unfortunately, there are no viewpoints which offer many of the strong compositional elements that were afforded by this overlook before it fell into the canyon. Now, it was a little cold and wet the day I was there, so I didn't make it further up the canyon to Punchbowl Falls, but a similar and even larger cliffside collapse occurred sometime in the 6 months following the fire. This changed the viewpoint to this beautiful location as well, although there are lots of other opportunities around it, but now there are large boulders interfering with the view, and even the route of the creek changed. I'm not sure if it's been determined if the fire led to the weakening of the cliff and helped contribute to this collapse, but there are sections of the cliffs along the Eagle Creek that suffered enough damage to increase erosion and perhaps lead to some small sections of the wall collapsing. It's not uncommon, so it's probably impossible to say how much effect the fire had. However, the entire landscape and ecosystem of this area shows the definite influence of past fires. And in fact, geologists say that large fires have contributed greatly to the landscape and vegetation of this part of the country. And this man-made fire gives us a little bit of insight into how that happens. Now, it took until 2019 for the Forest Service to restore the trail and allow access to these waterfalls again. I don't know if there's a new vantage point been created for Metlako Falls, or if there's any opportunity to get close enough to get an unobstructed view. And despite the fact that maybe a new viewpoint won't be quite as compositionally strong, at least to me, waterfalls are waterfalls, and great shots can be had as long as you can get a good view. It's well worth the trip to this area to try to get a shot of these waterfalls. It's a beautiful hike, and someday I intend to go back and go further up the canyon when I have a little more time. Of course, if you make a trip to that area, you don't want to miss Portland Japanese Garden. It's really a great, amazing place, and especially in the fall, one of the most iconic shots in landscape photography is the famous maple tree there, the Japanese maple, which I've photographed, I think, on 3 occasions now, and it's just a great part of the country to visit. Lots of things to shoot. Landscape photographer's dream. Well, I hope you found this video interesting. I feel that there are several shots I have like this. Kind of goes to show that landscape photography is not really a static thing, and a lot of the iconic locations that we shoot do change over time, some quite dramatically. And I plan on doing a few more of these. If you've got a location where this has happened to you, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the video. Give me a like down below and maybe recommend it to your friends if you thought it was kind of cool. And until the next one, see ya.